If I'm making this much in a corporate job where I'm doing this thing that I love like 25% of the time, and this is what the universe is compensating me with, what if I'm doing it 95% of the time? Just imagine how much the universe is going to compensate me for that. And I trusted in that. And thankfully now, the result is a multi-million-dollar speaking business.
Welcome to Amplify with Jess Ekstrom, a show designed to help women get out of their head and into their zone of influence.
Okay, maybe you need a change in your life. Maybe you're stuck in a job that you aren't loving. And while you love the consistent paydays and the warm embrace of health insurance, you also feel like there's much more to your professional legacy. I talk to so many people like you in our Mic Drop Academy who are not just looking for their next speaking gig, they're looking to make speaking their entire career. Well, today we welcome the world's leading expert on change enthusiasm, Cassandra Worthy, to the show. And while Cassandra is well known now on the speaking circuit, not too long ago she was stuck too. She was a chemical engineer who worked at Procter & Gamble for 15 years and thought she was going to retire there. But the voice inside her head told her that there was more out there for her.
There was always this intuition that I had, this whisper, and I know everyone can relate to this whisper that we have, right? And I had it ever since I started working in corporate, that there's something bigger, there's something better that you're meant to do with your gifts and your talents. And it really wasn't until I got sober. So I'll be sober 10 years in November.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. It has been a journey, and I'm so very grateful when I finally said yes to my alcoholism, because it was in sobriety that, the clarity was achieved and that whisper became a shout, and it was a shout I could not deny. And so honestly, I just started following curiosity, right? Thinking, okay, if there's something bigger, what is it? And so I started thinking, well, what am I curious about? What do people say that I'm naturally talented at, gifted at? And I started following this path. And first I thought I'd just be a self-help author. I'd help people find their joy and find their bliss and feel that joy that I have within me. And I discovered eventually this whole career of speaking. And honestly, it was by following curiosity, going to conferences, raising my hand, engaging, networking, that I eventually found myself on a stage talking about this thing, this mindset that I had been practicing to get myself through change, and then using these talents and gifts that so many people had told me about on a stage. And I was lit up. And I knew this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is where my intuition was leading me. And honestly, following that path of curiosity became a passion. And so I left corporate as I known it in 2019 and started doing my speaking career and now growing my global consultancy full time.
So most of that, I feel like I knew a lot of, but the sobriety part, I find really fascinating as someone who right now I'm almost 9 months pregnant. So I would say I'm 9 months sober. So
I love it.
Yeah. But I've explored a lot around drinking and what that does for my ambition, creativity, or what that doesn't do. A few years ago, I read this book called The 30-Day Alcohol Experiment. And it was each day was something around alcohol that was a myth. And you had to really figure out whether it was, alcohol helps you relax, or alcohol, you need it to socialize. And then you kind of journaled about what that meant for your life. And that one 30-day alcohol experiment turns into 6 months of just not really missing it. And I would say that I was just so much more creative during that time. I wouldn't consider myself someone who is sober, but I know that there are things in my life that produce noise and things that get in the way of that whisper that turns into a yell. And so I'd love whether it's sobriety or maybe it's just self-doubt or maybe it's just habit changes. There are things that are in our life that kind of get in the way of maybe this might sound cheesy, but a greater calling or a message that we want to share. What advice would you have for someone around that?
Yeah. For me, the ultimate thing that was getting in my way was me. And the self-limiting beliefs and the denial that I had in my alcoholism. And it was the alcohol and the drugs that I would turn to whenever I'd start hearing that intuition, or honestly, whenever I would feel, because my tendency is to run away from difficult emotion. And so I would do that by reaching for the bottle, or drugs. And it was when I shifted the self limiting belief that I was not an alcoholic, that I was only a problem drinker. When I shifted that belief to, I am an alcoholic and it's okay. I am an alcoholic and it's okay. When that belief came to fruition, and when I truly believed that in my heart of hearts, for me, it was my Keystone habit. And like everything else in my life started to change when I changed that belief. I mean, I honestly think I was meant to do the work that I'm doing, because I can see firsthand that sustained change happens from sustained belief. Understanding what are the beliefs that will actually bring the change into reality in a sustainable way, and nurturing that belief, that thought you keep thinking. And so for me, when my Keystone habit, when that self-limiting belief was crushed and I formed a new one, it's like my world became a lot clearer, and I had so much time on my hands. So much time,
It
because
is funny. I remember that. I'm like, wow, it's 5 o'clock. What am I going to do? That's when I
what
started
do I
playing
do
pickleball. I'm like,
now?
I guess I should play pickleball. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it was like time spent thinking about drinking, planning the drinking, actually doing the drinking, recovering from the drinking. And it turns out it was so much time, I had enough time to start another business. And so that's what I did, right? So I started growing my speaking business on the side while I was still doing corporate, because I had all this time on my hands and all this curiosity and all this energy that wasn't being wasted on thinking about or indulging in the drink. But yeah, it was getting out of my own way. And I'm so grateful that my mom, both my parents are actually in recovery, also recovering alcoholics for decades. And my mom planted the seed years ago that I needed to get out of my own way. And I couldn't really hear it, but the seed was planted, and that seed got nurtured. And I realized, my goodness, this limiting belief of, no, I'm not an alcoholic. Yeah, I drink, but I drink because I socialized. Like, I'm a social drinker. Might be problematic, but I don't have I'm not an alcoholic. But as soon as I shifted that, everything changed for me, and I was able to see this path towards my purpose.
Yeah.
And it was life changing for me. Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head around curiosity. I mean, so much, I think, of our changes that we make and the thought leadership that we can now deliver to audiences starts with being curious about yourself. And just staying on the drinking side for a second, one of the things that I had realized from this experiment that I did for 6 months, and also what made it easier to give up drinking and really not even think about it for both of my pregnancies instead of having that right there, was I got curious about the what was happening internally that was making me make decisions externally. And I realized that being self-employed and almost just like always feeling like I'm on the clock, I needed a signal to tell me that my day was done. And I needed a signal to say, you're done. Once this glass of wine hits your lips, like, there's no more emails, there's no more responsibility, there's no more expectation. And then once I got curious that that was what I was looking for, not the glass of wine itself, then I could replace that with other things. But I think with change enthusiasm and the topic that you give to so many audiences and people, and I want to talk about what we have coming up in July, it is getting curious about the internal changes that need to be made to have external results. Is that how you would classify it?
You got it. And this power of curiosity, of course, it can take you very far when it's outward, right? And a lot of my journey was outward, getting curious, making, stepping that one foot over the other. But, when you think about the power of authenticity, when you think about shining your authentic light, you can't truly do that unless you know you. And that takes boldness and daringness to get curious about within, to get curious about yourself. And you talk about signals. For me, it's the emotional cues, right? The emotional signals that happen. And why do I get so frustrated when this happened? And why am I constantly going for the bottle whenever I feel this thing? What am I running away from? It takes courage. It takes boldness to do that. But when you can step within, following that curiosity, that's when your authentic power can get unleashed. And yeah, the mindset of change enthusiasm starts with you. It starts in the signal, in the emotional energy, and having the courage and the ability to acknowledge and allow those more difficult emotions that we face when we're trying to start our own business, when we think there might be something else for us, but it's nervousness about leaving a well-paying job and a steady paycheck, and the fear I'm stepping out into the unknown and it's only me, good gracious, and listening to that emotional energy. And what is the opportunity it's inviting you into? And then choosing how you choose to step forward, how you navigate it to maximize the opportunity that I believe our emotional energy invites us into.
And I think one of the keys that you hit on is also doing that without judgment. And like, I'm an alcoholic and it's okay, or whatever it might be. And instead of being like, what are you doing? But I want to talk what you hit on about being in a job, having a salary, having that comfort, and you made that leap into something else. I mean, you could ride off into the sunset in the stability and the warm blanket of health insurance that you had.
And it was
That's what I say. That's my husband all the time. I'm like, I just want someone to wrap me in a blanket of health insurance and tell me how much money I'm going to make this year. Like that's all I want. But so I would love, there's a lot of people who are listening who maybe work a job and feel like it's an either or, like they either are working for someone else or they're starting their career in thought leadership or starting their business and they have to like decide and make that leap. Was it like that for you? Was it an either or? Was it a both and? What advice would you give to someone who maybe has that whisper that you were referring to at the beginning, but doesn't want to leave the security of a job?
Sure. And I'll share my perspective, right? And I think everyone's journey is different. There are some people who need to just jump with no parachute. They need that in order to move themselves forward. It was different for me. It was a both and. And it was following this curiosity while having a steady paycheck that served as capital that I could then flood into my other business and my curiosities. And for me, it was something that ultimately, yeah, I was curious about and I had the energy and the time. And it was something that I just wanted to do. And I was fine doing it for free. And maybe I would never get paid for it. And that was going to be okay because I enjoyed it so much. And so I started to get curious, explore, build the speaking business while still working full time. And I was working many, many hours in the day. I was working weekends, but it was doing something that I thoroughly enjoyed. And it was doing something that I was choosing to do, even though people weren't paying me, right? I launched my first website in 2018, in January of 2018. I didn't get paid to do a speech until February of 2019. Right. And for me, it was, I found that thing where I truly enjoy the journey. Now, not to say that there weren't times of darkness and bleakness and frustration thinking about, my God, I know that I can do this. I know that I can monetize this message and no one's calling me back.
Exactly.
No answering my LinkedIn messages. But Cassandra, I am going to trust that this is something I'm meant to do. Whether I get paid for it or not, I just need to keep putting out my ideas, keep putting out my thought leadership in social media, keep acting as if I have a flourishing speaking career, because I trust that it's hurling its way to me, because I wouldn't feel this energetic pull unless the reality of it was somewhere out in the future. It already exists. And it's pulling me into it. And I literally could feel that. I could feel the energy of my life pulling myself in that direction. And really, it was just stepping one foot over the other and trusting that it was something that I was meant to do. And so for me, it felt a lot less like a leap than it was the next step. Because for like a year and a half, I was taking one step after the other, one step after the other. And so when it came time to leave, I had more booking engagements than I had vacation days left. I was fortunate enough to liquidate a property that I had. So I had a good starting capital. And it was just the right next step for me. And it was me making that step and choosing to bet on me, on shining this light and living in my purpose, this thing that lights me up, and knowing that if I'm making this much in a corporate job where I'm doing this thing that I love like 20-25% of the time, and this is what the universe is compensating me with, what if I'm doing it 90-95% of the time? Just imagine how much the universe is going to compensate me for that. And I trusted in that. And thankfully now it's, the result is a multi-million-dollar speaking business. But it's trust. It's one foot over the other and betting on me, believing in me.
How can you make a leap feel like the next step? Like that is what we all need to hear, but the verbiage around starting a business and doing this is like strap your harness in and, skydive off the edge. But there are things that you can start doing, the low-hanging fruit, the buy the domain, launching your website, even if you don't get booked, adding the word speaker to your bio. Everyone can do that right after they listen. In fact, you can pause this right now. Just please add the word speaker to your bio. But one of the things I love the most about what you said, and this is something I'm super interested in right now and that I'm like working on for my next book, is this idea of like ridding ourselves of the feeling of we have to arrive in order to start. Like, what if we just started with the feeling of arrival? What if we started with feeling like I'm a multi-million-dollar speaker? Because otherwise, like we wait for the external validation to kickstart our internal motivation, which never works. The internal motivation has to be there before you hit the external. And let's be honest, the external moments never feel like what we thought they were going to feel like. And so, like you said, we have to be able to love the process instead of just waiting for the outcomes. And that can be tricky sometimes as a speaker because it's like you go from this really high of being on stage and feeling all this adoration to just like being in your hotel room and having to pay your taxes, or like for me, like going and like changing a diaper. And it is this like polar opposite end of the spectrum. So I'm like, how do I not fuel my life based on the highs, but be okay in the middle? Do you, and I actually am curious about this, even like with your sobriety and addiction, if that plays into sometimes chasing those highs too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, of course, in sobriety, it's one day at a time.
Right.
That's all we can take, but that's the focus. I won't drink today. And early on in sobriety, that's what I had to repeat to myself. I will not drink today. I will not pick up a drink today. And that's every day, every day. And so it's consistency. And that consistency also plays out when you're thinking about, shifting careers, starting a business, and it's taking those little bitty tiny steps every day in a consistent way. And one of the things you talk about, that feeling and how you had to rest and sit and find the feeling in the thing and act as if you're already there. I think there is magic in that. When you can envision and see it and then trust and believe that it is hurling its way to you. There is power in that. And I think that's one of the major ingredients of manifestation. Just to be straight up with you, belief and trust are one of the two major ingredients that continues to move me forward in my path of purpose and the things that I manifest in my life. I used to have what if days when I worked in corporate. And it would be a vacation day. But the what if day was, what if I was living in my multi-million-dollar speaking business life? What would I do? And I'd get up early. I'd do my social media post. I go to the coffee house. I'd write an article. I'd think about what networking event was I going to go to, perhaps try to do some cold calling, have some potential client conversations, discovery calls, think about my thought leadership, work on a speech. I would have these what if days. And eventually, the consistency in taking one step over the other peppering in these what if days. Eventually, my what if days were my reality. And I can remember the first time I was at the coffee house that I used to go to often for my what if days. And had already quit my corporate job. I was working on a speech that I was going to give the following week to a client. And I was like, oh my gosh, my what if day is my reality. And it's like, create that space where you can cultivate the feeling of being where you want to be and where you believe that you're going. There's power in that. There's power in it.
What a moment to realize, be sitting in that coffee shop and remember when you wanted what you currently have. And I think that is so tough to do with like just a wanting and achiever mindset, because you're just constantly moving the goalposts. Like, yeah, I got paid $20,000. Well, now I need to get paid 30. Or I got, this XYZ book deal. Now I got to give a TED Talk. And so if we're constantly moving the goalpost, we never realize when our what if days become a reality. I call that trying it on. Give yourself 2 weeks, try it on. What would it look like if you tried on being a speaker for 2 weeks? What would it look like if you tried on being a business owner? And then you always have permission to go back if it's not what you thought it would feel like. But you have so much framework and proven ideas around change, which you call change enthusiasm, which I love. And not only are you bringing this into companies yourself, you want to teach other people to do this with you. So talk to me about what you have coming up in July and how people can get involved.
For sure. So historically, Change Enthusiasm Global, my leadership development and consulting company, has been predominantly B2B. And so we work with large organizations. We bring learning experiences into these client organizations, empowering the individuals to put change enthusiasm, this mindset, 3-step process into practice, as well as our research-backed skills. And so we go through this either a 1-day program for leaders or a 2-day experience for practitioners to get you into putting this mindset into practice, arming you with tools. We go through journal exercises. You're left with these concrete tools. And so it empowers individuals within these client organizations to, of course, themselves find fulfillment and growth through change, but also for that client organization and the business to grow and achieve its growth goals. And so one of the biggest focus areas for me, and I knew it was one when I started this business, is accessibility. I didn't want this content to only be available for individuals who are working in large corporations. I want it to be accessible to become a credentialed practitioner of change enthusiasm, regardless of where you sit. And that's what we're experiencing with the back half of the year. So starting in July, we're going to have one of our virtual Change Growth Accelerator programs, which is where you get credentialed to be a change enthusiasm practitioner. It's going to be open to the public. And so our very first session is going to have 20 slots. It's going to be a date that we're about to formally launch or communicate in July. And then every month, we're going to have one of these Change Growth Accelerator virtual programs available to the public. And depending on how it goes, depending on the appetite around the world to have this be accessible, well, of course, we're going to get more and more and more on the calendar as we move forward. But again, this is something that I'm looking to elevate accessibility, that I'm looking to bring this knowledge, this tool, bringing in community, elevating these cohorts, not just for those working in corporations, but for those who are entrepreneurs, for those who just want to get better at change, for those who might be leading change in their organization, but the organization doesn't have any big change programs going on, right? And so I want it to be accessible to anyone to become a practicing change enthusiast. And so that's what we're going to be launching in July. And we have a website up now where if you sign up now, you actually going to get discounted pricing to become a practitioner. And I could not be more excited about this initiative.
And we'll put all of those links in our show notes. But where else can people find you? Where can they book you to speak? You're a great follow on LinkedIn as well. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So CassandraWorthy.com is my speaker website. You can Google Cassandra Worthy. Lots of sites pop up. I've got a YouTube channel with a lot of content, a lot of videos on there, nuggets about change and growing through change. And then if you want to learn more about the company, go to changeenthusiasmglobal.com. You can find our research there. We say that our work rests at the intersection of change and emotion. And so you see a lot of our white papers at that intersection from Western Europe to Asia to here in the States. And also also learn more about our process and how we engage with clients, as well as, of course, get signed up for the Change Growth Accelerator that's going to be open to the public in July.
Cannot wait. Cassandra, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for, I believe I slid into your DMs, which was how we first met. And I was not expecting a response, but you did. And I just appreciate you and our friendship.
It's my pleasure. And honestly, it was a gift to me that you slipped into those DMs. So thank you for taking that action and making that choice, because it worked out for me too.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thanks for listening to Amplify. If you are a fan of the show us some podcast love by giving us a rating and review. And give us a follow at Mic Drop Workshop and at Jess Ekstrom. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence, and I'm Jess Ekstrom, your host. Remember that you deserve the biggest stage, so let's find out how to get you there. I'll see you again soon.